I was sent for a whole month to Germany, to Heidelberg, for what I call the mind control training. It was extremely formal and it was extreme. So it's
Mm.
torture-based mind control. So I was made to now learn what men's weaknesses were. I was also in the same way I was through being forced to watch film, uh, forced to learn how men, what their perversities are based on just looking at them. And same with the weakness, just looking at a man and just figuring out his weakness, and then looking at a man, figuring out his sexual perversity. And I was trained to make my psyche open in many ways. For that was all part of all the
Look, I'm interested in your story because I've listened to a couple of podcasts with you, and I think my first introduction actually was on the PBD podcast. And I got to be honest, I thought it wasn't the best representation of your story and compared to some of the other podcasts that I've listened to. But it's inspired me to listen to more and more. And as I've gotten to know your story, it's yeah, definitely intrigued me to explore a little deeper because you've got such an interesting background. So I guess I would like to start for my listeners that may have not have heard of you before. I guess I'm really interested in knowing a bit of the background about your entry into child trafficking and ritual abuse and all of those things. Can you kind of go back to that part and maybe start at the beginning and just give me a little insight as to how it all began?
Sure, I'll try to do that.
Hmm.
So yes, I'm from Belgium. I was born there to a single mother, 1963. So not the usual thing at the time. And so my mother's not mentally well, and she was married when I was 3, and we moved. And I think we were targeted as a family. My stepfather was away a lot, and also very absent in his, just in denial. You could say absent that way as well. And yeah, my mother really wasn't well, so she was already abusive. Um,
Mm.
she was very nice to people when they met her. She really pleased people as much as she could, but with me alone, she wasn't very nice at all. So I think we were targeted. I first was taken out on little trips by the cleaning lady that came to work for us.
Mhm.
And her and her husband that originally at age 6 took me to an event where, well, the husband raped me um, first.
God.
And yeah, yeah.
So, why do you think that you were targeted? Do you think that there's something about, because I do hear this a lot when I look into stories of victims of child trafficking, it does ring a bell that is there's a theme of certain families that might be displaced or children that might have single parents. That seems to be a theme of how people are targeted that way. Do you think that that would be the same for you?
Yes, the vulnerable children, absolutely, whose parents, you can tell that the parents are gonna look the other way, or eventually my mother turned out to be so on board that she ended up taking over and taking the money herself.
Um,
So, so that is unusual for sure. Usually the parents are quiet, they are offered money. It's all unspoken, of course, at the time, at least. That's how it used to happen. And I think it's based on vulnerability. A child that's not protected by its parent is vulnerable. So it's sussing out which parents are really not safe. Nothing
yeah.
further.
Did did your mother ever get abused, or was there some sort of a history of things like that in your family that you've been able to discover?
She didn't know of anything, but she acted like that. She
Mm,
acted like a sex abuse victim. She was always pleasing all men. She was extremely flirtatious. We were in a rather small town, and she was wearing very short skirts, was mini, 70s, 60s, 70s. So she was just very enthusiastic about that fashion. You know, she kind of spoke like a 5-year-old girl.
really?
I mean, she had a deep voice, but she acted like around men. She acted like a 5-year-old, but sexualized, weird.
Sure. That must have been difficult growing up. So what's the earliest memory that you have of when you said you were raped by, was it what did you say just a minute ago? Was it your uncle or your partner, your mum's partner? Your,
No, no. He was in denial, so he just closed his eyes all the way.
mm,
It was the cleaning lady and then her husband, and they
oh, this
started
one,
taking me
yeah.
out on trips first, and then a year later, actually, they took me into what was an event, really a rather large event for in a castle. So yeah, and that I was really horribly abused there.
Wow. And so where did it go from here? Because um, not to, you can stop me at any time as to how much you want to divulge and things like that. I'll be very respectful of your history and how much of it you want to put forward. But I guess it's part of my curiosity to know, like, because at this, how old are you at this time?
So I was six
Six.
years old. Yeah.
And I guess as a 6 year old, like you really wouldn't have like do you have a sense or do you have a memory of a sense of this is there's something wrong with this picture, or do you have a sense of I don't know what's going on, but because these are adults around me, I'm just going to do whatever they say. Like, can you explain that side of it to me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually, yeah, I did know something was wrong. Um, and at the same time, it's impossible for a child to go through an experience like that and to not feel extremely ashamed and thinking that it's your fault. And anyway, that gets enforced. You get gaslit all the way anyway. But I don't think that would have been necessary to verbally do that. I would have felt the shame anyway, because these are shameful things that happen, and you don't know as a child that the shame doesn't belong with you. You don't know that you're even abused because I knew something was wrong, but that's very vague. I had been threatened extremely graphically and violently right from the beginning to not speak out. And I did anyway. I spoke to my mother. And, that's to say a 6-year-old has a vocabulary. And, I couldn't really tell her exactly what happened, but I said bad things had happened. And then my mother got involved herself.
Wow.
And then
The-
I felt responsible for that. You see, I
mm,
ended up feeling guilty because I thought that by telling her, I'd given her the idea, and that somehow, because of all the shame that's heaped on you as a child, I was just taking responsibility for everything. I thought everything was my fault.
mm. Wow, that would have been so hard. And so when your mother got involved, that I struggled to sort of get an idea of how you connect with people in this sort of field, or it's a like it's really a business and an industry really. But how do you know now how your mother connected with people to to facilitate this um like passing around of her own child for abuse?
Yeah, she didn't pass me around very much. She basically got the call and she would take me wherever she was told.
Wow.
So her
So
contact
how does that
person,
happen, Anneke, though? Like how does she? get the call?
Yeah, she got the call. The contact person that she worked with was basically somebody. Uh, she was a countess. She was herself a mother to a child that was also being abused in the network, clearly
Mm.
born into the network. So the abuse had started probably very early. That father I saw as a perpetrator in the network, and she was handler. So she was the person. She was the only person my mother was in contact with. But my mother really wanted to brag about her connection with this countess.
Wow. So it was like an elevation of status or something like that.
That's what it was for my mother. She was extremely focused on that.
And you were the gateway for that.
Yes, as she thought of it that way. She actually once said, and it's extremely crazy because we're talking me being 10 years around 10 years old.
Mm.
But she did once say, my mother, that uh, she was excited always, and she was also crazy, right? My mother's crazy. So but she thought of it as she thought that I was going to find a good husband. And that's really insane when you think that she is driving me to places in the night when I'm 6 years old. That's not to make sure that your daughter's going to get a good husband.
Mm.
But that is what she said.
Wow.
Once, she would say different things at different times. She was very dissociated herself.
Mm. And I guess like you're looking back at that now as from through an adult's eyes to understand exactly how your mother was at that point. But at that time, I mean, I just can't like I've got young kids myself, I just can't think at their age like how, or even myself at that age, how I would able to process that in a way that would make any sense whatsoever. But from the stories that I've heard about you, you were quite a talented young lady. Like you were a talented young girl. Like when did that start to come in? When you were singing and doing all of those sorts of things? At what age were you starting to be kind of like groomed to be a well-known singer or those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, I wasn't known to be talented, particularly and especially not in school or anything. I wasn't really doing very well.
Mm.
In the network in Belgium, I was considered a throwaway child because I was coming in from the outside, so I wasn't, born into it. Um, that meant that I could be used for anything, and I kind of was. And then it's really very much by accident that I attracted the attention of this international player um, because of the Bilderberg meeting. The Belgian people in the network, the politicians that were involved there, and the politician that was at the head of it, um, or not really the head. I mean, I should say that the royals were at the head of this network. So it's something that comes through depraved aristocracy and has been going on, I think, since the Middle Ages
Mm.
in those spheres. And there's a cultural element to it, you should know, that then also, because of the exploitative nature, it goes to business, of course, and blackmail and so forth. And the Minister of National Defense was definitely running a blackmail operation, and I was being used for that. But it was really very much by chance that I attracted the attention of that visitor to the Bilderberg meeting. And I was not at the meeting at all. I was around that, and for that purpose, the Belgians had um, basically organized a ritual because he was a Satanist, I guess. And then I had not at to that point. I don't think I had ever been in a ritual. I had been in horrific situations, don't get me wrong, but
Mm.
rituals are specific and they're religious. So,
Yeah.
and in that, I should say right after, or in that situation, completely miraculously, I ended up having an experience that I can only describe as a spiritual experience where this person who I thought of, I was 9 years old, a child had been killed, um, and I was crying for my little friend. And in that moment, something happened, and some some force came through me that I can only describe as a great spiritual moment. It felt like a Christ moment where suddenly it seemed like it was literally coming through the back of me, and I saw this man who I thought of as an absolute monster. I saw him as a child, and I saw his fears, and I saw everything that had made him what he was. And I felt, I didn't judge in that moment. It was a miracle. And because I had that moment, he then decided that I had talent, or I was smart. I had, it was not usual for a man like that to become vulnerable in front of a child. But because of everything I saw, and because I wasn't judging, because of the love that was really there, he got startled. He didn't know. I was also I went from crying to laughing, so he didn't know why I was laughing.
Mm,
And then he decided that I was sophisticated, and then set out really that what he had seen, that he had become vulnerable in front of me, and that I could see his weakness completely, his vulnerability and the little boy in him. He then went to basically had the idea to program me to make me into this star, but only really so that I would be his slave, um, and would be able to attract other powerful men
mm,
that I could then also see their weakness, make them vulnerable, so that he could have leverage over them. So he was basically going to try to use me either for blackmail or for spying. But that's why I was trained. I was trained in many countries, and a lot of resources were put into me. It was highly professional at that point, I can say. But it was really that one moment, which I don't give myself credit for that. It happened to me.
mm.
And I had this, no, I do have insight, psychological insight. I am good at that now. But as a 9-year-old, really it wasn't coming from me.
Sure.
So that's really what happened. He took that moment. He thought he was conscious of what he'd experienced and thought he could exploit that. And he also really loved being the person behind the star. That was clear. He was very much enjoying, because he was a pedophile, really much enjoying the time he spent with me to teach me. And, the secret that he could take me to public places and nobody suspected a thing. Nobody would ever suspect anything because he was famous. And he really liked being the man behind the scenes also. So he wanted to put me on the scene and in, the public's eye, but he would be the secret person behind me.
Mm. And did you ever find out who this person was, or was that
Yeah,
something
that's David Rockefeller. Yeah.
that was David Rockefeller?
Yeah.
And he and was is my memory serves me correct? Was he the one that took you from Belgium to America? Was that how
Well,
you
he
ended
didn't
up
take
in?
me right away. What he did is he took an interest, and that was clear. But then for several months, I mean, I was taken in a private jet to the United States
Mm,
a few months later.
yeah,
And when I was taken there, I actually remember the white carpet in the jet, and he wasn't there. And I didn't know why I was being flown or where I was being flown. I thought I was actually going to be sacrificed.
really.
Yeah. I
Wow.
didn't expect that I would be welcomed uh, as I was. And he looked really happy to see me and everything. And then I spent a lot of time with him alone, but he was basically seeing what my talents were then and seeing how he could use me best. And then they also must have figured out that my mother had me alone, but she'd had a one-night stand with my father, and my biological father is a composer of classical music, and he
Mhm.
came from a family of artists and classical musicians, and from a Huguenot family, which were French nobles, French nobility, and they had fled to Holland in the 17th century. So his mother came from that family, from a Dutch family, and I think that my mother knew who my father was. I didn't, but I think that they found out, and I think that's why they wanted to make me a singer.
Wow. So how long did you spend with David Rockefeller in the States?
A month. So obviously I didn't spend the whole month with him,
Hmm.
but I did spend quite a lot of time with him. Probably 3 weeks in his presence where I was either in a bedroom during the daytime sometimes, and he was going to do business. And I was in three of his homes. This was the month of July of 1972.
Hmm.
I was in his home in Westchester. He was teaching me, to eat nice foods and how to eat them. And he was teaching me to be comfortable in an elite setting. He let me talk about the art that was on the walls, and he clearly liked to hear me talk about it. I think that was he saw that I had an eye for art, and so he was like a really good teacher in that way.
Hmm.
He was seeing the good and he was just letting that flourish. So for me, I was like in heaven.
Sure.
But of course, there was also sexual training. But I was being seen in ways that I hadn't before. And so it was actually somebody seeing my intelligence, somebody seeing certain gifts that I, I had that were never seen before. So I was also getting some things that every child needs for their emotional development. So he was definitely a father figure,
Mm.
a very troubled one, but yeah, he became that. I was attached. And yeah, so I spent 1 week away, about a week. I was just, went in a limo to a family near DC, and I was kind of in that a guest in this family, sort of looked like an all-American, nice suburban family
Mhm.
with their own children. I stayed there for a week. They treated me very nicely. And then I was in his home in New York City, and I was in his home in Maine.
Mm. And so what happened after that? So he was obviously looking as at you as someone that he could utilize within his network. And
That's right.
um, I, I, you've gone from a what you called a throwaway child to someone who was quite useful and quite valuable. And so you're getting
That's right.
trained.
Yes.
In, yeah. What happened after that?
After that, I was sent for a whole month to Germany, to Heidelberg, for what I call the mind control training. It was extremely formal and it was extreme. So it's
Mm.
torture-based mind control. And it was very specific to what I was going to be doing. So what I had done when I saw him first, which is I saw his vulnerability, I was now trained by being forced to watch videos of men as they lost it, or as they were tortured, and how they cracked. So
Mm.
I was made to now learn what men's weaknesses were. I was also in the same way I was through being forced to watch film, uh, forced to learn how men, what their perversities are based on just looking at them. And same with the weakness, just looking at a man and just figuring out his weakness, and then looking at a man, figuring out his sexual perversity. And I was trained. to make my psyche open in many ways. For that was all part of all the training almost. So there's no singing there. There is no artistry. It was all about the spine and about becoming a sex slave for the elite.
Mm.
So it's really taught to join, to find that weak spot in men and then to present as the one girl first, the dream girl, or the twin flame or whatever later as a woman that is gonna see that weakness but pretend to love that person in that space.
Are you over 40, successful but unfulfilled? Do you feel stuck, like you're not truly living up to who you really are? So many high achievers wake up and think, I'm a good person, I read all the books, I listen to all the podcasts, yet there's something missing. Well, you're not alone. I've been there myself quite a few times. And quite frankly, it took a lot of years of really fucking around, trying to figure out what I now call your higher self blueprint, which has enabled me to live a life and make a living with my passions and my purpose. If you're ready to break free from a life that's holding you back, I'm hosting a free training around the 5 pillars of success that will enable you to create a more meaningful, fulfilling, and purposeful life. So click the link in the show notes and I look forward to seeing you in the training. But for now, let's get back to the podcast.
For the purpose of making that person then addicted to me. And I was already being trained to, psychically, even psychically operate. And then later on, so then, I was sent back home. So 2 months I was away from home.
Mhm.
I was sent back home. And then afterwards, I was sent to Germany quite a bit from Belgium. I was taken by the Belgian handlers, would take me to Germany, and I spent a lot of time with a man, that German politician Kurt Kiesinger, that was a chancellor previously.
Mm.
And I had already started to psychically, I mean, the way that I was open psychically was already to connect with him. And I know it all sounds very, very extreme. It just is very, very extreme what is done. And then what it does to the psyche is also extreme. And it does bring out your gifts, but the fact that it's torture-based makes it that everything ultimately becomes fear-based.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I'll just continue because then I was also during a school holiday I was also sent to France, and there I spent time in over a week I think, but it was in a basement, but it was below a castle, a big castle, and there I had an entourage, and there I had singing lessons, and that teacher was a famous French singer, composer of these pop songs. And see, there I was trained to become, I would be a French singer actor. And so the entourage was dressed and I was naked. And this was to help me understand that my body did not belong to me. My body was to be an object of worship. And so I was actually did get used to being naked there. The entourage was just giving me compliments all the time, very flattering. They were also doing my hair. I was supposed to look a certain way, which was look very natural, like you just roll out of bed kind of thing. And again, I'm a very young child. I'm now 10 years old.
Mm.
But they were doing my hair. I was getting facials. I was getting massages. So there was no, it was not creepy. There was even photography taken. So obviously this is not normal. I'm a 10-year-old naked child and there's a male photographer taking pictures. And
Yeah.
yet the focus wasn't creepy. It was more to give the focus of me being a star and being used to having an entourage. And then, this famous singer who was also a handler, he was then also touching me sexually. during the singing lessons,
Mm,
to alter it so that my voice would be more sexy, sounding more breathy.
mhm. Wow. So am I correct in assuming that if they're taking images and having you walk around naked and things like that, is that one of the earliest depictions of distributing images or even footage or anything like that of young naked girls? Is that something that they would share around? Do you have any sort of intel or any information to know that those sorts of things were being passed around, almost like you're a model in a catalog?
Yeah, right. Well, I think that I was a product, and that was being so the resources were being put in this product. So I was going to be, first of all, a very expensive sex slave. So there was a lot of money being made. I think already in the 1 year that I was active, I was already probably sold quite a bit, and this is at extremely high sums. It's very likely that the German chancellor, the former chancellor, that he paid also. And so he would pay to have an elite child sex slave who knows how to behave, even though I might not speak the language. I could be next to him and not make myself, make it so that nobody asks a question, that nobody notices anything.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to do, I have to say, but okay, that's the idea, that there's an elite sex slave who they can fall in love with, the pedophiles. And then later it would be the same as a famous singer actress. It's the same. I would be sold at astronomical prices.
Mhm.
And of course, I would be well rewarded if I was if I was supposed to, the idea was that I was going to become part of it, that I was going to be part of what they called the family.
Mhm.
And that's what went wrong after just a year. But I think those photos, for example, if I would have been famous, would have been worth a lot. Yes. And
Oh.
but other than that, I had already been used before in, for things that were clearly child pornography.
Mm. And is this all part of the fantasy of, from the pedophile's perspective? Is that part of? I don't know how to word this correctly, but is that part of the illusion that they want to create is having someone who is a very young person, and they're creating a scenario or a scene where they themselves are being desired and they can sort of feel that attraction. Is that something that they're almost like a play or a movie that they're trying to create within themselves? Is that making sense?
Yeah, I think so. I felt that they were always trying to prove that they were right. I
Mm,
felt it very strongly from David Rockefeller that he was always trying to prove that this was okay and that this was right. And, it was as if I always felt from abusers that they had been abused as well. I don't think otherwise you could be magnetized to be attracted to a child
mm,
sexually. I don't think that's possible
yeah,
if you haven't experienced it yourself as a certain age, because it is so disempowering. It's so humiliating. It's so extremely traumatizing. The the disempowerment that is felt in that moment, and the trauma and the splitting that happens, this is one way. If you're not healing, it is just one way that you can then, and it is the most raw way, and it is the most addictive way, is to go, when you're an adult, is to go and do that, because the burden that's placed on you, the burden of shame that's placed on you in that moment,
mm,
is really heavy to bear. And so because they're wrong, I think they have a lot more to prove. And
sure.
because they're organized, they constantly prove also with each other that this is right. But I found that this really twisted mindset that goes into Satanism as well, which is that the or if whatever brand of Satanism it is. It could be Luciferianism, or it could be, like the Aleister Crowley. It's all about reversal, but reversal of what? It's
Mm.
everything gets reversed. So if they say on the simplest level, good is bad and bad is good,
Sure.
it is a childish mindset. And it is from somebody who is emotionally completely mature. That's why these men need children. He would have
Mm.
been afraid of an adult woman. Children are going to please you. They have no choice. They want to think of children as beings with a choice. They train them and they threaten them, and then they say, see, she does everything you want.
Mm.
She's made for this.
But that element of
Completely
this,
insane. Yeah.
yes, it does. It just sounds so nuts. That element of the Satanism is an interesting one because I agree with, I hear and I agree with what you're saying. However, the element of the satanic part of it, I really struggle to wrap my mind around why it's a thing. Like when you think about any kind of religious text or whatever religion you want to label, there is a higher power, and everything is a force for good, and there's a certain rules and guidelines and commandments and things like that that we abide by and that we live by and we try and embody to become the best version of ourselves. But I don't understand the appeal to the satanic, the abuse, the mind control, the MK Ultra, the like it's the business side of things. Like it's so multifaceted and multi-layered, but it all draws from this very distorted, like you said, inverted world of, bad is good. And I just, anyway, I can't wrap my head around it, but I was hoping that perhaps you could give me some insight as to, because I know you help victims now, and I know there's a lot of things about your work that is on the healing side, which I'd love to get into in a little bit. But how does the satanic part of it work? What is that sort of glue that holds everything together? Why is it such a powerful and prominent thing that I can see in entertainment industries, in political scenes, anything to do with an elite status has some sort of link to satanic ritual abuse and all of these kind of sacrifices and bits and pieces like that.
Yes, the way I see it, because I do see things more on a psychological level, is that when a child is being abused and they lose hope that that little child, that innocent child, is ever going to be seen or heard for who they truly are, and
Mhm.
they lose hope, that this loss of hope creates a death inside. And that death inside can remain dead. And it could be so that your heart closes up completely. And when your heart is closed, that's to say, when you're not feeling empathy for others anymore, when you've basically given up, then you're not going to believe in God. You're not going to believe in the force of good. So in this sense, in this world is dual. This world is light and dark. So in that sense, as long as we're attached to the physical, we see that this is a dual world, but everything that we can perceive directly is physical. And that's Satan's world. I mean, it's our delusion that, we say that when we pass on, we talk about our bodies passing on. And so then what is deeper, what is true is all really invisible. Who I truly am is really not visible when you and I are speaking. We're looking at it, at bodies. So the Satanists say, well, then, this is the world of Satan. So might as well give into that and get the best out of it. Because when you do join this world of Satanism and basically blackmail and exploitation, and you do get rich. It depends on what you want. But if your heart is closed, then it's someone with obviously has to have their heart pretty closed, not to see the innocence in a child, or not to see, you know, the cuteness, not not to care about cuteness, to there's there's the element that I think keeps Satanists and Luciferians and people who are really part of that elite and really part of it, keeps them there, is, I believe, their incredible sense of superiority that is just strengthened by their idea that they're from a special bloodline, that they're related to, that means that you're related to nobility somewhere. But when you look at the history of nobility, it's not a very nice picture either anyway. So
Mm.
the true bloodline, true intelligence, because when your heart is closed, it doesn't mean that you cannot be super, super intelligent. And in fact, it can make up your smarts, can definitely make up for the lack of emotional intelligence that you have. And you can see that being promoted everywhere in the world anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just it's just that when you follow greed, because it's something inside of that, all of these people had given up. And then the hope of being loved, truly, and then put their investment in fame, riches, and you can get that. It's very difficult, you know, to say no
Mm.
when that is offered to you. A lot of people get invited in after they become famous. That
Oh.
was actually, I was supposed to have a role inside with my eye for art. I was supposed to repair, so this was talked about, everything was talked about. And I was supposed to repair talented artists, visual artists. So this is from me speaking about the paintings that were on the wall and what I could observe. So I was supposed to find talented people, but then draw them in to the network so that they would then be seduced by the network. It's biblical, but it is also like that. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it does. But I guess the overarching theme that I'm hearing from you is that there's power, fame, money, control. There's all of these very uh, very lustful, sort of appealing types of things that come from that. However, you are worshiping someone or something. It's almost like there's an offering to a darker power. And do you have any sort of insights as to, what or why that is? Like, why would you want to worship Satan? Why would you want to sacrifice a child? Why would you want to
Yeah,
any
yeah, good
kind of
question.
ritual or those sorts of things? What's the purpose behind all of that?
Well, see, that is where it is religious, because I have been in these situations, and what I felt very strongly was that the people there present were feeling connection in that moment,
Mm.
horrific as it is. So through the indulgences and indulgences in all manner of drugs, alcohol, and so forth, but then getting into these states where most horrific things happen, they feel a connectedness, they feel a higher purpose in that moment. I don't think anybody, I think most people in the world and most people even in the network do not look forward to sacrificing a child. But if you want to belong, that is the ultimately, the when you once you are in the network right away, and even me from 6 years on, when I was just very little child and I was a throwaway child, even I was already being prepared to become a perpetrator. All children that end up in the network are immediately put in situations where we're forced to cause harm. And by doing that, we either lose the sense of right and wrong, and we give in to the violence, and the violence is like any addiction, it brings release. So either you give in to that as a child already, or you you're being coerced and you keep being coerced and you never want it. Now they're so good at splitting you that you're going to have parts that are just going to be good at it and feeling the relief also, you see. But as a child, you can never say, well, I didn't want that. So as a child, you have no free choice, no free will. But they want to think that children do have free will. And to a certain degree, I was also tested on that, because if you are part of it, you need to give your free will. And it is a matter of free will. But I think it comes from someone who is maybe not received enough unconditional love, or has no connection to spirit for whatever reason, or no connection to anything higher, like higher power, no connection at all, no sense of it. So then, people are indoctrinated that way. And then when do they lose it? I don't think most people want to do that, but it is the price to pay. And so they shift. David Rockefeller would shift in different parts before, it's not like he was this person that that the public gets to see, was not at all aware of what he would be doing in a ritual. You see, the dissociation works. I mean, I was very dissociated. I didn't remember anything for several years, but the perpetrators are dissociated as well. I didn't remember when I went to school, I didn't remember. And the perpetrators, when you see the image that they've created and how they present to the public, they don't know in that moment. So that's why it's so hard to believe also,
Yeah.
because they really don't believe it themselves.
What's fascinating to me is like there are moments in my life and parts of my life that I try to achieve a higher sense of connectedness, whether it be from a spiritual point of view or to the earth, or there's certain types of feelings and emotions and states of being which give you this heightened sense of I don't know, oneness, I guess, for a lack of a better word. But it sounds like it's almost the equal and opposite that these Satanists are trying to achieve. It's
It is equal. It is equal. Very good. Very, yeah. It's
like it's a force for good and one's a force for evil, but they're two sides of the same coin. Is that on track?
absolutely, because the high that is experienced in these inebriated states where everybody is roused up and horrible things happen. I tell you, the relief that can be felt from violence.
Mm.
So you're doing the ultimate harm, but in the same time, all your burdens are, for that moment, that's why it's addictive. For that moment, all your burdens are lifted from you. So in these states, you feel incredibly high.
Mm.
And when you are ending up carrying so much, and for that little moment when you're projecting everything on the victim, and everything is released in you, from you for that moment, the high that creates, and then that connected with others that are all experiencing that release and relief in that moment from their own stuff, from their own trauma, really.
Mm.
That and that connectedness, and then the fact that it works, that they do get the high posts, they do get rewarded. People get the sadists get rewarded the most. So people do get more sadistic because once you go in that direction, there's no stopping. And that's what I believe is so hard to believe for the public. It is a gradual road, but you do get indoctrinated even already as a child. So it makes it very difficult, to use your free will, I think, as an adult, to say, no, I'm not doing this. It's much harder. I had an experience of near death where I felt the bliss that is the reality. Like I felt the love, and that is the only reality of everything. And I was experiencing that, and I was in that state of bliss in my astral body. Well, what I had even experienced in the network came pretty close. So that's true. It is almost equal. It's grosser for sure. Because the state of bliss, you have to work really hard at it. And whereas in these satanic orgies, the release comes from letting go of everything and just going into blind repetition from the perspective of the perpetrator, the one who has the power.
Yeah.
So everything becomes about power because as a child you were disempowered through the abuse, and then in abusing another child or in doing harm, you're feeling power. In the violence, you feel power, you feel the release from that abuse that you suffered when you were a child. And then it's addictive because it's without any awareness.
Yeah. That point you made about your near-death experience, that's something that I hear a lot when I've interviewed people that have had near-death experiences, and they go to the light, so to speak, and they've got an invitation to go back to reality, and they don't want to because it's so good, where the feeling's so good that they're like, I'm not sure if I really want to go back or not because this feels amazing. So yeah, that is true. And then the other thing that you said with respect to the release that people get and that sort of, it's almost like a liberation and a freedom, which is really juxtaposed in the act that they're doing. But you can see that in relationship as well. Like I think in a healthy partnership, there's also elements in your sexual relationship that can be viewed in the same manner, if that makes sense. Like there's a liberation and freedom to be explorative and to you have that sort of sense of control, that sense of vulnerability and letting go and all those sorts of things. So I can see the appeal.
But when you're with a partner in a committed relationship, there is a communication happening. The freedom that is felt in the network in those during those events is the idea of freedom, but it is a sense of liberation, absolutely. They feel in that moment liberated. But again, because it's not real, it becomes addictive and it needs to be done again and again and again. Also to prove, they have a lot to prove. And at the same time, the whole world is kind of showing them up to be right in that sense that they do have the money and the power. So it does work. And it does take a lot of strength, I think, to go against it.
Yeah. The thing that's, I guess, really bothers me is that, like, for example, in Australia, Anneke, we've had a very famous royal commission called the Wood Royal Commission, and it was on satanic ritual abuse. And there was a list of 28 high-profile names that were in a police document, and there was former prime ministers, there was QCs, there was judges, there was like police officers, like there were so many people on there. And they did this, from my memory, they did the Wood Royal Commission, and then they did another one because the person who was in charge of the commission was a pedophile himself and was protecting all of the people that were in that sort of network. Um, and there are people like which Rachel Vaughan. I've interviewed. There is Fiona Barnett is a very famous or a person in Australia here who's spoken out about this.
And we know each other too.
You do? Okay, yeah. So I haven't spoken to Fiona, but I've spoken to Rachel, Gabby Chung. There's a few people here in Australia that are really making the awareness of the abuse become, sort of second nature to people in around the world, because we can no longer deny that this has been going on for centuries, but it continues to go on. So, like, how sort of how does one get to the point where you can put a stomp on these things, or how do you eradicate this, or is this I was going to say a necessary evil, but is this an evil that you have to accept in the world, and there's always going to be a battle for good versus evil? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there'll always be a battle of good versus evil, but it doesn't have to be this extreme in the sense of that
Mm.
that the population is too scared to look, and that everyone is indoctrinated to look up to these people
Mm.
that are that are that are having us pay for our own indoctrination, you know,
Mm.
while controlling a lot of our lives still. And I think, the fact that there was a commission at all is amazing. The same happened in Holland. There was a commission, and the commission was led by the Minister of Justice and people. It was named after somebody who was named by some victims. So the same thing happened there. And then in Belgium, we had the Dutroux case, which led to satanic activities of the Belgian network. That case, 30 people who wanted to testify in that case um, died. Um, so, and then it ended up being pinned on one man. So the fact that these cases are there to begin with is fantastic. And I don't think it'll always happen. I think the battle for evil and good will always be here because this is a realm of duality.
Mm.
But this time that we're in, now that everything is sort of being revealed, that I even have a voice at all is amazing. Um, 40 years ago or 30 years ago, I certainly never thought that I could ever speak because nobody wanted to hear me even privately. And therapists didn't want to hear. So the openness of people is what is will the consciousness will create the change. I mean, if we all know, then it can't exist anymore. The action comes from the awareness. So there's still a lot of people that can't see it, that don't want to, need to believe that the world is what it is presented as by those same people,
Mm.
where politicians do their best and we elect them and then they try to help us and oh, it's very tough and that's not how it works. And I don't even know if that it can be overwhelming though to get this information because if the image that you have had of the world is threatened, then I
Mm.
can certainly understand that you have trouble believing something like that because it's going to reach your own trauma.
Yeah.
Is the way that we're all kept in this um I mean, already the world is illusory, but it feels like the network has put an extra net of delusion over it that we're getting an image that is not real from the people that want to control us.
Mm.
And
But they
so
do
there's
it
a lot.
so well too, Anneke. Like they have the the stars, they have the all the musicians, they have all the actors. Like, you know, there's a lot of bells and whistles and a lot of glitz and glamour that is very
Absolutely.
distracting to the
That's the
lay
point.
person who doesn't want to really scratch the surface. I mean,
Well,
um,
that's the point. But at the same time, I'm thinking of, was it Gal Gadot? She did a video. She invited in 2020 during lockdowns, she invited all her famous actor friends to do a video about of Imagine, the song Imagine.
mm,
And it's still up, I think. It's very funny because it's really bad. And it's also clearly very arrogant to think that you can give hope to people by doing such a bad version of that song. And I think it's been watched many millions of times, and the comments are hilarious because clearly not everybody is falling for it anymore. I think more and more those stars are kind of falling through the cracks, and
mm,
things are becoming apparent to more and more people all the time. Also, as more is coming out, Satanism is being pushed more as well. So it's becoming, everything is becoming more
yes,
overt.
yes,
And
that's
then at some point you say, well, I don't think I want my daughter to go to that concert,
yep. You're
if
exactly
that's
right.
being promoted.
Yes, I mean yeah, you hit the nail on the head. There's almost virtually a ritual that's appearing on live TV in Super Bowls, or whether it be a music video or something like that. And here in Australia, like, we've had situations where we've got drag queens reading books to children, and, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. It's just, you know, it's just so blatant and so brazen. And
Yeah, we
yeah,
had that here too, and that started 20 years ago in Brooklyn. It started 20 years ago, and in itself, no problem if you want children to be used to, not judge people. There's an adult drag queen coming to read to children, but then the next week you have somebody who has no legs.
sure.
And then, if you want children to be open-minded, then you don't have only drag queens reading to children who are very often extremely, not always, but very often very sexualized as well. That is the problem. I was going to be part of the agenda. Obviously they want to make the whole world pedophilic. So if you abuse children young, then you have more potential future pedophiles. If you get children in the schools and you confuse them about sexuality, I mean, a lot of these things that are happening in the schools is just child abuse. It's exposing children to sexuality.
Mm,
So basically, they're being pushed into it, and it's the agenda has evolved so much. So being born in the early 60s, um, the agenda to sexualize everything and vulgarize everything has made incredible headway. It is unbelievable. The Moors have changed completely, really.
mm,
And it's all going towards accepting pedophilia. But you see, most people that have been sexually abused don't become perpetrators. And I think, our strength is that the people in the network and the pedophiles and, all the people that want to support them because they have no heart, they they do not understand love. And they do not understand, and they always underestimate people because they feel so superior to us. When
mm,
in fact, as far as worthiness, any person that is just caring for their family is worth, is a better human being. So all those people that are trying to be better all the time, it doesn't even matter the confusion. Everything is coming out. So I I'm a survivor. I don't have any, I have my own mission. I have my own healing modality
mm,
for us to look at our power, how we ourselves might be influenced by power and power dynamics, and how we operate from that place so that we can sort of heal ourselves in the context of creating that change, that we don't give our power away
Mm.
to some, and we don't, try to dominate others. That's my, I have my unconditional model. That's my contribution. Of course, I don't know how it's going to unfold,
Yeah. So,
or it is already unfolding, I should say. Yeah.
yeah, well, I would say 100% it is. And it's also something that would have a ripple effect amongst the people that you're working with with your healing modality. Is that something that to me obviously sparked from a psychic ability or a spiritual, that heart opening, or that sort of experience that you talked about when you were 10 years old? Do you think that that is a conduit to getting to the point that you are now, where you've got a healing modality that you can help other victims like yourself?
It's true that that experience is really everything, and that my faith also is everything in that. That's why I'm so strong. I'm not strong anybody of myself, but the strength doesn't come from me. The healing is just to allow in that love, really, to learn. I knew that I would have to, well, I didn't get a choice. I had to come back. I didn't want to come back. I had to. And I knew then that I would have to learn that what I had gone through, what I had done, even as a child, and even though it was coerced, was going to be so difficult to heal from. And I would have this guilt complex. And so it would be very difficult to learn to love myself. And so if I can't love myself, I can't love others. So I had to go through that healing process. The healing process is just allowing in the love. And then when your heart opens, it breaks, you feel the pain, and just increasingly allowing the heart to open and feeling all the pain and learning eventually to love yourself, and then being able to spread that. And that process of healing is a spiritual process too. There is, it's not medical, first of all. It's never been medical for me. Psychological, yes. And I do have that talent. And anyway, of like, I was impressed during the mind control training in Germany when I was 9 years old at the structure of it and how effective it was. And so even though that was a horrific training and I would never wish it upon anyone, I did kind of see, wow, it's effective. And I am myself very effective, very practical. And so the unconditional model grew out of my, it took me 40 years to get to this point.
Mm.
And it came from my work with incarcerated populations in the prisons. So 10 years ago, I started to think how, because if I'm going to work with incarcerated people, I look very privileged, because in mind control, you're taught to appear normal. So, that's a lot of mind control survivors, I think, seem very normal. Not always. There's also discard programming and things that, that really do a number on people. But I always appeared relatively normal, maybe a little over sexualized also at certain points, for sure. But um, I I could it really helps. It's growing. It's like learning a lesson and getting it, and then feeling the expansion of consciousness is what happens when a part is integrated. I feel, they say a memory gets integrated. It's essentially always this. As a child, you had no choice, and then you end up with this lie that you have to take on, and it's a lie about you. So, there's a man who rapes you, and you think you are absolutely dirty because that's what he puts on. Is he puts that on you. And that's why he's doing it also, to pass on his own shame and to put that lie on me. So now I feel that I am dirty, and now I'm sitting here with this lie. And I can go either way. I can go scrub myself. I can become bulimic. I can have anorexic. I can do many, many things in response to this feeling that I have inside of me, this idea that has been imposed on me, that I'm dirty, which has been entered into me with force, with the rape. So it's gone in my body. Someone's memory has been inside my body and they've left stuff there and it's gross.
Mm.
And without an adult perspective there, a loving adult perspective to tell me, my little girl, that wasn't your fault. That man, he was a grown man. That was horrific. What, you need that little girl never grows up from that moment on. She believes that she's dirty, and you have a part, and that part still believes that she's dirty, no matter what you do to try to clean yourself. And then you need initially, you need somebody else to tell you that it wasn't your fault. And then, as I had been receiving that help for many decades, I can now do it also myself often.
Mhm.
I can, I can speak to my parts, and I can come from my own adult self and be there and bring that perspective. I have the perspective, I have the right perspective now. I still have parts, but it's when the part integrates, there's an expansion of consciousness that happens. And that's a spiritual experience.
Mm.
You love more, you're more able to love and understand people, you have more compassion, you
So
feel more yourself.
it must be difficult though when you're, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're going through that process, you would have to revisit that particular memory, feeling, emotion. It would have a place in the body that it would be trapped or stored, and you'd almost have to face your demons once again in order to get to that point where you can expose the lie for what it truly is in that moment. Am I on the right track?
Absolutely. It is hard.
Hmm. It'd be so frightening. Like, I can't imagine it, even in my own life when I think about certain moments in time where I need to deal with that particular memory. But I mean, it pales in comparison to something that you've been through, or someone who's been abused as a child. That would, I'd
Yeah,
imagine there'd be a lot of resistance from people that you work with that don't want to go there, that are so frightened that they don't want to open up Pandora's box. But you must have a process that kind of puts a lid on things, right? And helps you associate more with your body and become attuned and aligned with the divine individual that you are versus the label and the perception that has been placed upon you and altered your mind and your perception of yourself when you were a child.
yes. Usually when people come to me, they may not know anything, but soon it starts to open up because they come to me.
Sure.
They don't go to somebody else. But but yes, it is a matter of just being present with. I love my work because I feel like I feel so honored, to witness a person in process, a person having that courage, to open the chasm and to go into the depths. And it's just a matter of being present and lovingly, like with compassion. And yes, very much, being with a child and seeing the child for a child, seeing the innocence of the child and the impossible situation. And it's very beautiful work, though. It's precious.
Amazing. Anneke, I really respect you for the things that you're doing and the full circle that you've sort of been able to loop back and start to help people that have been in the same and similar situations to you. I think it's definitely sorely needed. I can imagine that, you wouldn't be short of people that are wanting to be helped and to resolve some of that sort of trauma and agony that they've been able to overcome over the years. So I really applaud you for that. If people are listening to this and they want to reach out to you and they want to be brave enough to sort of connect with you and see if they can get some help, where would be the best place for them to go?
Well, my website is very the best place for everything. It's AnnekeLucas.com. There's resources on there. I have a blog where you can read a lot, all completely free. I also have my book, my memoir, that you can find there. I do workshops about the unconditional model and others, some live, some online. So all the information is on my website. So that's the place to go.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you as well. Thanks for your thoughtfulness.
Well, it's my pleasure. Until we meet again.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.